Welcome back, everyone. I'm Rick Blackwell in for J.D. Hayworth. Breaking news from over the weekend. A former Department of Homeland Security employee, Patrick Haney, wrote an article on The Hill alleging that he was ordered by his superiors to delete or modify the records for several hundred people tied to Islamist terror organizations, potentially hindering our intelligence agencies from connecting the dots and finding and stopping terrorists from coming into this country to carry out attacks. For more on this disturbing story, we are pleased to be joined via Skype from Tampa, Florida, former intelligence officer, former advisor to General David Petraeus, Colonel Derek Harvey, and in Newsmax, Washington, former Defense Department spokesperson J.D. Gordon. Welcome to you both. If this DHS employee's allegations are true, what does this say about how our administration is handling intelligence?
Well, Rick, I think it's a black mark, but it falls in line with what we're seeing, I think, with too much political correctness. We've seen it with the pressure on city police departments in New York, for example, and others to back off the scrutiny of activities and individuals who have had linkages to a type of dialogue, vitriolic dialogue that promotes an atmosphere of violence and intolerance within the Islamic community.
J.D., what kind of holes does this leave open in terms of our national security?
Hey, Rick, good to see it. Well, it leaves a lot of holes. You know, I think since day one, President Obama has been trying to downplay the threat of radical Islam in the United States. I was a Pentagon spokesman at the time. My last 9 months were the first 9 months under President Obama. And he was saying things that were flat out false about Guantanamo and about defeating radical Islam. You know what? And he's still deceiving the American people about it. So he's engaged in a deliberate attempt to basically say nothing to see here, move along. These Muslim terrorists are not even Muslim. It's got nothing to do with Islam, which is false. This is just a part of that mosaic.
Well, CNN reported that intelligence gathered prior to the Paris attacks, ISIS plotted attacks on 5 European cities. And Colonel Harvey, I want to ask you, what does it say about the reach that ISIS has?
Well, they have deep reach. I think they're trying to put into place operational capability. Paris was one example of that. These organizations with professional cadre are patient and they're strategic in the application of their resources. So, you know, going after these targets like Paris, like Brussels, Germany, London is part of a larger strategy. And they've been very clear about this. They talked about it in speeches almost a year and a half ago.
J.D., moving now on to another big story. Google announced that it will show anti-ISIS ads to counter ISIS's online narrative. What's your take on this? Is this a smart approach to counter ISIS's online strategy?
Well, I think it's one smart attempt. I'm glad Google's doing it. I think it's overdue. You know, Mark Zuckerberg was really quick to defend this clock boy in Texas, which was a complete fraud. So if Google's going to take that kind of thing about Mohammed the clock boy and say, oh, he's a victim of Islamophobia, when actually, no, he perpetrated a bomb hoax to the school. If Zuckerberg's going to take that position, sure, then he ought to be engaged in trying to stop people from joining the Islamic State. It's a good move, but long overdue.
Colonel Harvey, I'm curious about your take. Do you think this is going to be effective? And certainly what looks good to us may not be effective to the target audience.
Well, I applaud the effort. We need to do better in this domain. But I'm really concerned about what type of voices and our ability to communicate in the socio-cultural religious domain effectively. The voices that I've seen used in the past have not been effective. They don't hit the target audience very well. And keep in mind that ISIS is trying to shape the Western audiences, and they use a variety of means, not just Twitter and Facebook, but also Telegram and others. And I think what Google's doing is some ads, I worry about the effectiveness of those. They're going to make it harder for people querying about ISIS to get to the types of materials put out by them and elevate in these search queries the positive narrative stories, particularly on YouTube, which is a good start. But I think it's got a long ways to go to make sure that it is culture matched to the target audiences.
Colonel Harvey, we appreciate it. Great first segment. We're going to have you guys stick around for another one. And when we come back, are the Iranians already breaking the nuclear deal? Satellite images you're definitely going to want to check out. It's coming up next, right here on Newsmax Prime. Is Iran continuing to conduct secret nuclear tests? 7 months after the controversial nuclear deal was signed, there are some who believe the Iranians are already breaking their word. They point to these satellite images taken over Iran's Parchin military facility. What do you think? Now, the image taken in 2010 at the facility 20 miles southeast of Tehran, the same area 5 years later. The new photo shows new buildings. Are they being used for research? Some of the ground has been paved. Could it have been done to remove evidence of nuclear explosive testing? And what about the new tunnel entrance? Does it lead to a test chamber building? Well, let's invite back a couple of experts on Newsmax Prime to see what they think. J.D. Gordon is a former Defense Department spokesman and former intelligence officer and former advisor to General David Petraeus. Colonel Derek Harvey, welcome to you both. J.D., what do you think? Is there anything in the photos that could prove the Iranians are not living up to their end of the deal?
Well, yeah, I'd say so. I'd say that Iran has been cheating since 1979. You know, they've broken dozens of accords with the international community. And at Parchin, we believe that they tested a trigger mechanism for a nuclear weapon years ago. And they've been trying to cover their tracks ever since. So these satellite photos are not surprising. Iran's going to continue to cheat. You know, for Iran, we're just a bunch of infidels and kuffers over here. They can tell us whatever they want as long as it justifies the means. And I believe Iran will get a nuclear weapon because Barack Obama has been so weak in confronting them.
Colonel, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, says they actually sampled the soil at the site for nuclear particles. We now know the Iranians actually gave them the soil samples. So we can't see through the rock, but do you think the Iran deal will help the IAEA get to the bottom of this?
I don't believe that we're going to see IAEA getting to the bottom of it. You know, the alleged intrusive inspection regime is anything but. And if you're going to have an inspection regime, you have to have political will to make sure it's enforced and with consequences. We've already seen that it does not appear to be the case. So we're in a situation where Iran can continue to set conditions, make preparations, violate ballistic missile tests, continue warhead development and construction, all under the guise of deniability as well as preparing for a breakout.
Well, J.D., there are a lot of people, I think you're one of them, that don't want the Iranians to get $1 from the recent nuclear deal. Well, they may get their wish because it looks like Iran wants to be paid in euros. Now, one troubling aspect behind this is really the fact that European countries are rushing to do business with Iran. So does it make sense, though, that they want to be paid in euros? What do you think about this latest development?
Well, yeah, because they want to get off the U.S. dollar. They don't want to use dollars or have dollars used because that could hurt our currency and that could hurt our standing in the world. So, of course, they want to use euros. And also, I'd say a lot of this stems to corporate greed in Europe, too. They're more worried about the bottom line and making money in Europe. And we see the same thing with the refugee crisis. You know, 1.1 million went into Germany just last year alone. And a lot of that reason is not just political correctness run amok, where they're guilty over Nazism and fascism and colonialism. Corporate greed in Germany is encouraging these people to come so they can get cheap labor. So it's terrible. Political correctness and corporate greed are going to spell the end of Europe.
Yeah, it's always been a concern. What would our European allies do as far as their relationships with Iran? Well, Colonel Harvey, the president has called climate change the greatest threat to national security. Now we see the president's priority actually implemented into all the military's actions. Do you know how this will work, and how will this affect the men and women currently serving right now in the military?
Well, it's affecting programs, mainly research, with mandates on the services to shift to energy, clean energy sources, to get away from oil as much as possible, and to institute strict measures in order to make this shift, and to use the services, again, not as a social lab, but as an economic lab in order to facilitate this transition that the Obama administration is pushing politically.
J.D., we got about 30 seconds. Kind of a scary headline in the Washington Times declares World War III inches closer as Turkey says it may enter the Syrian conflict. We've got Putin and Russia supporting Assad. It looks like Turkey and Saudi Arabia are going to support the Sunni forces opposing the Syrian government. Should Americans be concerned this regional war could blow up into a proxy war? East, West, Sunni, Shia. Your thought?
Well, it already is, but Turkey's completely justified if they did go in there. There are 2.5 million Syrians in Turkey right now, destabilizing the place, committing terrorism. And also in northern Syria, you have the Turkmen who are allied with the Turks. Lastly, the Turks have this guy here in the U.S., Fethullah Gulen, an Islamist cult leader that they've issued an arrest warrant because this guy has the largest charter school network in America, 140 schools, 25 states. We ought to deport him just like the Turks want. We don't need any Islamist cult leaders running around America.
Situation got even more complicated. Thank you very much, J.D. Gordon, Colonel Derek Harvey, coming to us from Tampa, Florida. We thank you both for your expertise.